Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's super special episode of the Fantasy Fiends podcast. We are live with Nicholas Eames once again with his brand new release, Bloody Rose. Yes, welcome back to the show, Nicholas.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
That sound rattling around is Nicholas and his whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
Are you serious? Oh my God.
I'll put it down.
Now that's how you know it's going to be a good podcast. This is definitely 100% water in here.
And this is 100% brandy.
This is 100% refill.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I had to stop the whiskey because I was getting really bad hangovers because I don't know how to stop. Well, I don't know how to stop. The last time I had whiskey was Black Barrel Jameson, and I drank half the bottle at D&D night. I haven't been invited back to that D&D campaign. Literally, I have not been invited back, and I was the dungeon master.
I may have killed everybody's characters.
I think it got sexual for some reason, but it was the day before Easter. It's like such a religious day, and I'm so hungover. It was the second worst hangover I've ever had in my life, and I was like,
"Wow,
I'm sorry, Jesus."
Well, the last time I had a really good D&D group going, we had this deal where whenever someone rolled a 20, we had a bottle of Famous Grouse we bought before every night.
Oh yeah.
Whenever someone rolled a 20, they got, what did they get? Oh yeah, they had an M&M dispenser with like a big M&M guy. You pulled his arm and M&Ms came out.
Yeah.
So they would get to pull the M&M guy's arm, and then whenever someone rolled a 1, they had to do a shot of this Famous Grouse.
I was going to say
the best was the combo when you had a mouthful of M&Ms, and you were like reeling in triumph, and suddenly you fucking rolled a 1. And it was all over. And then suddenly you had a mouthful of grouse.
I was going to say, you get the good stuff for the D20, and then you just get like the cheapest, plastic bottle, horrible stuff for when you roll a 1. So they really feel that sting of punishment.
It was pretty vile. I'm going to bring it back. I'm actually going to be running a D&D, like a Kings of the Wild D&D thing this Christmas, around this Christmas.
Whoa.
So
well, are we invited?
There's going to be whiskey. No, there's these guys that old friends of mine that do like a guy's getaway every December or January. They go to this remote cabin in Quebec, and I went with them a couple of years ago. They really do it up. They like organize what everyone makes at different times of day, like food wise, into like a spreadsheet. And then everyone's got these boards that they've constructed that sit on top of them that have a place for like their dice, for their character sheet, for everything. Like, it's just insane.
That is awesome.
So usually they do like Rollmaster, but I think this year we're going to do Kings of the Wild. So
I have to go change my underwear. Like, I have to. Both ends.
It should be pretty good. We're going to use Pathfinder, I think. But yeah.
Do you know Pathfinder? That is so much more difficult than D&D, I've heard.
Oh no, it's easy. It's exactly D&D 3.5, except just streamlined. Like, it's anyone who's ever played D&D could pick up Pathfinder without even looking at a rulebook ever.
Really? I've heard that it's harder, but I believe you.
No, there's not a single thing different.
Really?
Not a thing.
That's awesome.
Which
like not a term. Yeah.
Because 3.5 was the best.
Yeah, 3.5 was the best. I haven't played the new one. I hear it's really good. 5? Is it?
Yeah, I think 5's the latest. They really upped the complexity factor. Like instead of just your base stats, there's just like a ton of stuff in the back of the sheet that you've got to choose as well. So it really makes it a lot more complicated. Fun too. Once you get the hang of it, you get into the game. But for newbies, it's way too much. Are you going to take them on an adventure into the Heart Wild, or are you going to do something else?
Yeah, might as well go into the Heart Wild. I mean, it's either those kind of games are easy to start. It's like, okay, you guys are in a band. What's your name? Here we go.
I have had a dream that I was in the Heart Wild one time. It was halfway through last year, because I think about the Kings of the Wild a lot, especially when I'm writing. And I met the troll, and we both got high together. So it was really, and actually I pictured him just like the artist who did the troll that you sent out in the special edition. So it was a really cool dream. But hey, fanboy time. I have a few fanboy questions that your readers want to know.
My favorite.
And by readers, I mean me. Okay, so what is your schedule when you're writing? So how does a regular writing day go when you have to write something that day? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, my schedule is really all over the place. It's something that I definitely need to improve on. I literally just kind of get up and after I have something to eat and then I start writing. But I am so fucking terrible at it that it takes me 8 hours to eke out like a few hundred words. And then hopefully if I've got the night off and I feel like it, I'll just keep writing into the night and I'll just write all day. And this is how it goes. These days I haven't got very many commitments, so I literally do it all day. But you'd think my productivity would be high, but it's really not.
I think about you a lot whenever so I try and push out 4,000 words a day. It's just part of being an indie author. That's what we have to do. I know it's different for trad pub people. It's like a different lifestyle, right? Like you have a whole year to write, don't you? Like a whole year to write the next book.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably have longer than a year ultimately because I just do write really, really slow.
Mm-hmm. But it's like you're writing poetry. Like every sentence is so well crafted, and
I appreciate that. I do agonize over every one of them.
Yeah, you can tell. Actually, a few of the people I'm in, Facebook groups, and they're talking about it. And a couple of guys were like, I'm not a big fan of Kings of the Wild. They were like, I have to admit that even if I'm not a fan of the story of the characters, the writing itself was awesome. And these are people who are successful, self-published or traditionally published authors. They were like, the writing is awesome, even if they didn't identify with the story, which is as high a compliment as it gets, I guess.
And I'm not friends with them.
I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear that. No, it's true. I mean, and sometimes writing isn't all what it's like, all it's cracked up to be. Like say when Brandon Sanderson wrapped up those Wheel of Time books, I loved them. I couldn't be happier with how they wrapped up. But I remember one day looking at the last page of one of those books, and I was reading it and I was like, there's not a single sentence here that I would have been fine leaving the way it is. Every single one of them was just fucked to me.
By Brandon Sanderson or
by Brandon Sanderson.
Oh, wow.
But when you read them, you really don't notice because Brandon Sanderson's whole thing is sweeping you along and he's just good that way. So honestly, sometimes writing I think is overrated, but it does make me happy that people do recognize it because boy, I'm like right up even the syllable count on a sentence is like I care about.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. It's not like there's not some sort of like, majestic poetry in there if you read it all once, but every sentence needs to sound good to me.
I think everyone will agree that you are a master of character creation and getting a reader to fall in love with the characters. I would read a Kings of the Wild book with the original band, even if it was like even if it was like a Seinfeld book, like nothing happened. I just want to be back in that world. And the only thing I can compare it to is even if Star Wars comes out with the most shit movies, I will still watch it just to be in that world. I don't care as long as there's lightsabers and the Millennium Falcon. I'm good. I just want to be in the world. But The Last Jedi, oh my God. Don't get me started. But yeah, I just want to be in the world, right? That's how good your characters were. And Ganelon, I mean, I want to know it's Ganelon, right?
Yeah.
I want to know what happens to him, after. What I'm trying to say is, are you writing a book 3 or is this it?
Oh, no, I'm writing a book 3. I'm contracted for 3 books.
I knew it was 3 books. I just wanted to make sure that it was still happening.
Yeah. So are you done Bloody Rose?
I have not. I haven't even started it yet.
Okay. So I won't spoil it for you.
So my girlfriend who's watching,
book 3 is going to be after Bloody Rose?
Yes. Yeah. Bloody Rose takes place about 6 years after Kings of the Wild. And book 3 takes place about 15 years after Bloody Rose.
Are we taking it back from the perspective of Bloody Rose?
No, because Bloody Rose is actually told from the perspective of her bard, a girl named Tam.
Yeah.
But the whole trajectory of the books itself, like book 1 is very much like kind of inspired by 70s music, and the wholesomeness of 70s music and the ramblingness of 70s music, whereas the second one is inspired by 80s music and kind of like the heart on your sleeve, bigger, louder, bolder than trying to be just like the 70s, but everything more. And then the third one is inspired by like early hip hop and grunge, like the anti-establishment sort of deal.
Interesting. And now
so you'll hopefully see the world itself change the way our world changed from the 70s to the 90s. You'll see that world change, not in the same way, but as drastically.
But yeah, that's actually one thing that I got at the end of Bloody Rose was that there were going to be these big sweeping changes to just the society at large. Like, and that was something that I really found that could make for an interesting next book is seeing how these changes, not so much seeing what happens once they're made, but how they're made, because like that's such a monumental task that they're setting out to accomplish, which, considering how the society is structured, it seems almost too big of a change. So that was something I would find very interesting, is that journey of how they brought about that change.
Yeah, it's a very, very drastic change from between the second and the third book, far more than the first and the second. But it's not a change for the better at all in any way for anybody. Men have it bad, monsters have it bad, everyone's got it shitty.
In book one, something that I've noticed with the whole change thing is, without giving anything away, at the end we meet these younger bands, and you can tell they're already different from the older ones. Which in my opinion, they were different. They were changing things up. They were using wilder names. Just what? There was one more fanboy question I had, but I think I'll just wait until it comes back to me. Today's topic was brought up through, or Andy and Nick came up with the topic. And Andy, do you want to present it?
Yeah, sure. It's actually such an awesome concept that was one of the things that I really enjoyed actually about Bloody Rose. Okay, so just a little backstory on this. When I started the book, I was intrigued, right? Tam was an awesome character. You introduced me to all these characters. But then you kind of, we go through the repetition of the gladiatorial scenes from the first book, and I liked it, but then it got okay, I want to get to the to the meat of the characters. And pretty much as soon as they left all the cities behind, as soon as they stopped that partying, that's where, in my opinion, it got really good, and it really delved into the characters and their relationship to each other. And by the end of the story, I was like, shit, that was good, because of that element and that dynamic of these strangers sort of finding each other and making a family. And that's something that is often brought up in military movies, like the Band of Brothers style thing, where these people, they're just going through the ringer, they're wading through knee deep shit, and that brings them together. It binds them, it makes them this family. So that's the topic of the podcast, was families forged in fire.
Yeah. And what a topic.
Do you have any friends like that you would consider like family because of stuff that you've been through with them?
Oddly enough, none of it is. I've had a really, really charmed life, so I've never gone through terrible adversity with friends, and I am privileged enough to be able to recognize that. Maybe some drug fueled heart to hearts, but that's about it.
What?
But I do have friends. I think everyone does, and hopefully everyone does, that they do consider family by far. Yeah.
I actually just recently lost my friend. Not death, but he'll never watch this, so I can say it. But he's heavy into drugs, and we're older now, but really bad into drugs. And I think he pushed himself away from me because he knew he was dragging me down, and it was getting to a point where I was just seeing him once every month, because I was going less often and staying for less, because I knew it was a bad influence. So Andy took his place. What a privilege. And
or not.
Yeah, so I considered him family. But what I was going to say is, my family usually adopts people. It's always been that way. We usually, without even thinking about it. And for some reason, when I was younger, I attracted people with really bad backgrounds. Not abusive families, but just ones that really didn't pay attention to the kid. And so my family would consume them. And within a couple days, they would stay a week and stuff. And we'd be taking them on vacations to Mexico and Europe and stuff like that. It's just how my family was. And when Andy brought this topic up to me, that's the first thing I thought of, as well as some things that I've written in my book. But actually, from the last time we spoke, I don't think I'd published my book yet. I don't think I had.
That's been a while.
Just about to.
Yeah, I was just about to. But yeah.
Andy's published 7.
I know. So I actually am on schedule by February 1st to start publishing 5 novels.
Yeah.
And it's dinosaurs and magical swords. So
perfect.
Yeah, my brother's getting his PhD in dinosaurs and paleontology.
Dinosaurology.
Yeah, dinosaurology. So it's going to be really.
I'm a professor of dinosaurs.
If I were getting my PhD in paleontology, I would start my classes that way.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually
isn't that a line from Friends or something?
Yeah, it's that one guy.
It's gotta be.
What was I gonna say? But we've had him on the podcast, Nick, my brother, and it's so cool to hear him talk about biology and putting it through the lens of fantasy. And I was shocked how smart he was, because usually he's retarded. No, it's just a joke. But you have a brother too, right? And you guys go watch it. You guys see, I'm becoming Canadian. You guys, wait, do you guys say you guys?
We sure don't. No, we talk just like the people in your movies do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's stronger. The accent's stronger here on the West Coast, I think.
You think so?
I think so. I mean, I've heard people from over where I'm at in BC, and they have a really strong accent.
I think it's whenever you get anywhere rural, because even the people from Vancouver now tease me from the way I say things in Ontario, because Ontario is a bit more rural.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Fanboy question. What is your favorite 70s rock band, classic rock band? I'm guessing Rush.
No, it's damn close. But my favorite 70s rock band is Led Zeppelin. They're just too iconic. I heard a couple songs of theirs recently that I'd never heard before somehow. I missed them, and I'm just blown away by them. Just like everything about them was incredible.
Well, as an author, I think Led Zeppelin's a really good band to like, because me and my girlfriend were talking about this. Do you know the story about how they got their name, Led Zeppelin?
I don't think that I do.
Because their first producer said, "You'll never make it. You're going to crash like a Led Zeppelin."
Oh, crazy.
And so they took that shit and used it. And I just thought it's like a slap in the face, So as authors, it's just kind of just keep pursuing.
Yeah. Well, Rush is a good one too, though, because Rush, especially when you're writing a series that goes from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Rush has phenomenal albums in all of those decades. Like fucking phenomenal albums. They never got bad. It's insane. They changed so much, but they never got bad. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that was it for my fanboy questions. Do you write in the nude? No.
Well, let's go. Seeing as the books are very music inspired, which bands sort of do you think of or do you feel when you write? Let's say for Bloody Rose, what were the bands that inspired that story or those characters?
Yeah, no problem. Bloody Rose, the first couple bands that started inspiring it were Pat Benatar was one. She's got that song "We Belong Together."
Okay.
And so she was her relationship. She married her guitarist, who's just the coolest looking dude, and they have an enduring love that goes to this day. And so they were kind of my inspiration for Rose and Free Cloud, because they're together.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, and there's no point in the book, where you think they might break up, or you think, oh, maybe Rose likes someone else, or maybe Free Cloud likes someone else. Like, they are fucking made for each other, and they're just rock solid. And so that was my inspiration for them. And then Queen obviously is a huge, amazing 80s band that has so many songs that some of them are like, these power ballads that are great for like Princes of the Universe. I don't know if you heard that song. Well, I'd never heard it until I started writing this, but it's just like awesome for fight scenes. And then there was a song called Too Much Love Will Kill You, that is just like heart-wrenching. And there's a line in it that says something like, torn between your lover and the love you left behind, which for Free Cloud is just such a huge, poignant lyric.
Yeah. Totally.
So Queen was a big one too. And then obviously just in the bombastic side of things, bands like Van Halen and Poison and things like that, because I'd watch these documentaries on them, and they were just nuts. And I had originally written that scene where they go on tour for the first part of the book.
Yeah.
And then I was listening to the autobiography of Keith Richards on audiobook, which is fucking phenomenal, by the way. And I was like, I have to go back and make that crazier, because they are not wild enough. And I still didn't. They don't do half the shit that the Rolling Stones did. But I did add a couple things in there that the Rolling Stones did into that tour phase.
Are you
even down to the drink that Roderick brings them, a drink called Corn and Oil, and that's straight out of that book. They drank a drink called Corn and Oil.
I remember. What was that again?
It was rum, and I forget what the other ingredients were, but I listened to that, and he described it, and I'm like, okay, I got to put that in the book.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Are you excited for that Queen movie coming out?
Quite. It should be pretty damn good.
I guess I don't really understand it. So is some of that footage real footage from them in concert, you think?
I don't think that any of it is. I think they just somehow really nailed that Live Aid concert was the one where he's wearing the white t-shirt or white
get chills
undershirt
watching it, you know?
Yeah, and even if you ever watch the live video of that, the video of Radio Gaga is that concert, and it is just stunning. Just stunning. Like, it's so cool. They just owned that crowd. And then Meatloaf is another massive inspiration for book 2.
Meatloaf.
Just massive.
I did not.
Yeah. I mean, those Out of Hell albums, thankfully, the second album came out in the 90s, so I can hopefully use some of it for book 3. But they're just stupidly good, especially the second one. The lyrics on every single song, like Objects in the Rearview Mirror. I don't know if you know the lyrics to that song, but I remember I read them out to somebody once, and they were like, what poem is that from? And I'm like, oh, my friend, it's not a poem.
The
amazing song in the world. Yeah. And that song was actually a huge inspiration for Clay Cooper's like backstory. But someone right when I was almost at the end of Bloody Rose brought up a Meatloaf song called Crying Out Loud. And I wasn't overly familiar with it. So I listened to it, and I listened to it again, and I ended up listening to it probably 1,000 times since then. And the climax to Bloody Rose is written very, very specifically to the whole midsection of that song.
Wow.
And it would not be the same without it, and it would not be the same if that person on Twitter hadn't recommended it to me. So
I cannot believe how much music has inspired your writing. Like, you are so knowledgeable of all of this. It makes me feel so passive with music. Like, I just either like a song or I don't. Well,
it's only because of the writing. Trust me. Like, I didn't listen to 70s music beforehand. 80s music I did because I was a kid at the time. But it's not until I steep myself in it that you learn more about it. But until then, I really wasn't.
Yeah, I feel like I know a lot about 90s music. Andy, you were born in the 80s, right?
Yeah, 87.
87. That's right. I keep forgetting.
Oh, so you barely got it, though. You barely got it.
Yeah, no, I was too young. I didn't really get much till like the mid to late 90s.
Me too. Now that I'm listening to 90s, like, that's the music that I really loved and related to when I was a kid. But the 80s, you kind of like, I was born in 77, so my childhood was through the 80s. So I have this imprint of like, and I've told my uncle this. We used to stay over at my grandma's house, and I have an uncle that lived with his mother. And my brother and I would either sleep in my grandma's bed or my uncle's bed when we went to sleep. And if you were in my grandma's room, you just stared you were in the pitch black, and you stared at the giant old person's digital clock tick over from time to time. And if you're in my uncle's room, you listen to 80s music, and he had this equalizer, and cars went by on the highway, and you listen to like Take These Broken Wings, or, you know, all these crazy 80s, these beautiful like slow jam 80s songs. And it definitely made an impression on me for sure.
That's so
one more fan question. Not one more, probably. So at the end of Kings of the Wild, we get a sample of Bloody Rose. And 2 quick questions stem from this. Did you write it as soon as you were done with Kings of the Wild? Or did you have a plan for it? What was that all about? Because I feel like the characters are different from the sample than what we got.
A little bit, yeah. As soon as I was done with Kings of the Wild, I started actually writing a Kings of the Wild prequel before I sold it. So I wrote a chapter where they're all in a bar, and Clay meets Matrick for the first time, and Ganelon gets in a bar fight, and they save his ass, and he joins the band, and their very first bard dies. And then in the second chapter, they're about to go meet Moog, but once I got the book deal, I had to write a trilogy. So that what you've got in at least in the first edition of Kings of the Wild that came out, the main character's name was Tom, not Tam. It was a boy.
Yeah, it was a boy. That's why I was confused.
Yeah. And they also took out Kira and Brune. They took them, we took them right out of that scene just to make it kind of shorter and more concise. But at the time, they were very different too. Brune was kind of the same, but Kira, she's a character who's in Bloody Rose. She summons these kind of monstrosities off her. But in the very first draft of the book, when I first started writing it, she just kind of had like wings and things like that tattooed on her that would come to life. So it was really, really different. And I was about halfway through the book before my editor and I came up with the idea of making the main character a female instead of a male. And it immediately felt so much better.
Really?
And more unique.
Okay.
Yeah, just because the idea of a young teenage boy infatuated with a woman is pretty typical. And granted, there's a lot typical about the story. But the idea of a young teenage girl who idolizes that person and then throughout the course of the book gets to judge whether or not that person is worthy of being an idol to them is, I think, much more interesting.
Okay, yeah, because if it was the boy, we have that sexual relation there, and they're probably infatuated because they're attracted to them. Is that what you were trying to say, or is that?
Yeah, there was definitely some of that. There was definitely some of that. So taking that out made it, I think, a much better story.
Yeah, I'd have to say that it would have been a very different read had it been a young. Because also, like, I mean, in one of those first scenes where she joins in the fight, you know, where she picks up the bow and shoots the Cyclops, I believe it was. Had it been a young boy, that would have been much more stereotypical, you know, because guys are much more aggressive. Whereas the fact that it was a young girl who's very clearly musically inclined, and then it just so happens that this is in her nature. Yeah, made the character much more three-dimensional, much more interesting, so that ultimately when the climax happens and things happen, it really felt much more interesting than had it been a young boy.
I think so too, and especially because, you know, the book's called Bloody Rose, and the main focus of the book is Bloody Rose. It's about her journey, technically. Seeing it through the eyes of a boy would have just been different. You would have been much more of an observer than I think Tam is, because I think Tam is trying to relate to her throughout the course of the book. And without that infatuation, I think it just makes her lens on Rose a bit clearer, you know, and she gets to interact with other characters, but Rose is just Rose, not an infatuation.
So this is really your third book, because you wrote a book and then you didn't like it, and then you wrote Kings of the Wild. And now we have Bloody Rose, and then half the prequel, right? Or a quarter of the prequel, maybe.
No, just a couple chapters of the prequel. What I'm writing now is like a full book 3, yeah.
Okay. My question is, was it hard for you to write a female protagonist, being that it's so early in your writing career? Because I'm considering doing it for a new series later on down the road. And I'm nervous.
I don't think so. It was something that I definitely wondered about when I made the switch. And also, it's a female gay protagonist, which I wondered about too when I made the switch. But ultimately, no. And I think one of the things that so far, at least, people have liked about the books and responded well to is that, especially things like sexuality, like Moog's sexuality in Kings of the Wild, isn't treated as a major character trait. It's just part of them.
Amazing. And Andy and I talk about it all the time. That was actually, I know this is weird, that was probably what made Kings of the Wild so special for me. Moog has been an inspiration for a lot of my characters, and I actually open Kings of the Wild and go to your funny parts, and I study your comedy, because Andy knows I like to put comedy in my books. I kind of read with I mess with the reader's mind. Like, I'll make it really funny, and then boom, something terrible happens, and it just creates this sense of realness, in my opinion.
I wouldn't know what that's like at all. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for saying so. That's really awesome.
You know what I took away from Kings of the Wild that was just like the most random thing? Moog's quest for the owl bears.
Andy loves that.
So you've got this central mission that's driving everybody. Everybody's very united, but then it fails to take into account that everybody has their own wants and desires. So this guy's sort of infatuation, his side quest, as it were, it just really gave me a new understanding of the characters that I write. And the next series that I wrote, I made sure that each of the characters had their own side quest. Obviously, that dovetails into the main series. But it was just such an interesting thing for me to stop thinking, because all of my series have followed one character. And so everything is very linear. Whereas life isn't like that. The guy who joins up for 2 chapters also wants something of his own. So there's got to be some allowance for that. Or, this side quest thing was a real eye opener for me.
No, it's a good point. And it's something that I probably haven't thought about as much as, in that perspective too, that that it gave Moog a whole other layer to his character, and the fact that he wasn't 100% invested in what they were doing. He also had his own agenda.
Yeah, or he was someone beyond his place in the story. Like, there's the one character I think that I like, Ganelon's his name, or there's a couple of characters that it's been a year now, and they almost feel a little interchangeable for me, just because their only goal, so to speak, was servicing the missions of the group, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's not bad. You know, there's always got to be the supporting characters, but the character of Clay, Golden Gabe, and then Moog, those are the ones that really stand out, because those are the ones who had the most agency.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I noticed about Bloody Rose, is that all of the characters had their own agency, sometimes at different times in the story, like Brune with his whole family dynamic, and then Kira with her tattoos. When you got into that sold me on the character, absolutely. But each of them have their own sense of agency and really drive not only the main narrative forward, but then their own narratives forward. And they came together throughout, and then of course at the climax, to make this really cohesive story that I felt worked a lot better than the Kings of the Wild, in terms of everybody coming together.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kings of the Wild characters, I think, are a bunch more kind of like archetypal. I don't know if that's the right word, but they're easy to relate to, and especially for, you know, male readers. And they sometimes appear deeper than they were, I think, for a lot of people, because they're easy to empathize with, and they each get kind of one heart-to-heart scene. You know, like Ganelon gets his walk in the woods with Clay, where he's like, I was alive inside the stone. But you don't get any other deep character stuff from Ganelon. And Matrick, you get a little bit of him when he's talking about his kids, a bit when he's dumping his boots out and he's like, I was a shitty husband and you should blame my wife for everything. But you don't get too much. You get one heart-to-heart kind of from every character in Kings of the Wild, because the pacing is so quick. Whereas in Bloody Rose, it's just a different style of book. It builds up a lot more. You spend time with each character. And so I think the characters in Bloody Rose are a lot deeper, even though they're harder to relate to in the beginning. Hopefully you relate to them by the end. Whereas the Kings of the Wild characters are so typical, you're kind of tricked into empathizing with them.
Yeah, definitely. That's how I felt. The beginning was a little harder to get into.
Yeah.
But then by the end, like, I think I read the last 200 or 300 pages on Kindle in one sitting, because it was just, you know, I was hooked on the characters. The story, I almost felt like the story was background, you know, the massive undead dragon thing, a bunch of that stuff. It was awesome, but it was so background to the characters, and that was what I wanted to see. Sort of like in Black Panther, the movie. I don't know if you enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, I loved it.
But like the fight scenes in Black Panther detracted from the culture, from the technology, from the characterization, all of that. And so that's almost how I was feeling at the end. Of course, it was that awesome battle scene, you know, at the end, with all the bad people doing bad things and good people doing good things.
Yeah, that's great though. I'm really glad you felt that way, because that's great.
Quick question. Are you still on tour?
What's that?
Are you still on tour?
What's tour?
Your book tour?
Oh, book tour. No. My thing was just that it wasn't so much a tour as it was like I went to San Jose for Worldcon and did a couple events there. And then I went to Vancouver, where I used to live, and that's where I had my book launch. So for the whole week before that, I was mostly just hanging out with friends, and the book actually came out early, so I was bombing around to bookstores and signing copies. But I was there for that, and then now I'm back in small town Ontario, working away.
Good. Yeah. So when is two questions now? Number one, the character that is sort of the central focus of the next book. Can you tell us that without spoiling the end of Bloody Rose?
No.
It's not Clay Cooper, and it's
I don't want to Clay Cooper. No, I just can't tell you anything about that either.
That's fine.
I'll tell you that Moog will be in it. I'll tell you that Moog will be in it.
That's
because
awesome.
I mean, if I wrote a Kings of the Wild book with a Moog in it, I'd just be crucified. So we'll go with Moog for sure. But I mean, taking place so long after Kings of the Wild, the reason it does that is because it has offspring of people that were in Kings of the Wild.
The character. Okay, that's who I was thinking of.
Yeah.
The character grows up essentially, and it's going to be their story.
Yeah, but not just them. There's some other ones too. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we going to have any of the Kings of the Wild? I mean, the Bloody Rose characters still around, or
Totally. Yeah, they're going to be pretty fundamental in it. A few of the Kings of the Wild characters, but yeah, definitely the Bloody Rose characters too.
Awesome.
Yeah, really, because I mean, it's got to wrap it up. So even though it is its own separate story about its own separate characters, it will have to wrap up the whole series as a whole, tentatively, and it will have. I mean, I already got the last. I had for over a year what I thought was going to be the last line of the book, and then my brother was like, "Oh, you know what it should be," and he said what it was, and I was like, "God damn it, that is 100% going to be it." And then we both started crying. So it'll be the last line of the book will be something that people who have read Kings of the Wild will enjoy a lot more than people who haven't. But hopefully it'll bring everything full circle.
And will it be about those specific bunnies, the rabbits that are sort of background in books 1 and 2, or no?
Like the Druid, you mean?
Yes.
Oh yeah, it'll have quite a bit to do with them. And I think each book, someone brought it up the other day, that each book kind of hints at the end what the possible bad guy in the next book will be.
Yeah.
And that's true for King of the Wild into Bloody Rose, and it's true for Bloody Rose into book 3.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love how we're not talking about the topic at all. Yeah. We're just doing an interview, which I prefer because I've been looking forward to this for so long.
Well, I've got a good way to talk about the topic. What about just say, well, we can name a couple, you don't have to narrow it down to one, but what are some amazing like found families in fantasy that you absolutely adore?
That's
as an example of one, Lies of Loch Lamora, like the thieves.
Yes,
that's a good one.
The bunch. They're you don't see them for long, but that's a pretty good example of like a familial structure.
Yeah. Another dysfunctional one is from Glenn Cook's Black Company. In many ways, they've got you've got the guy in command is definitely the father. Then you've got the squabbling brothers that are the 300 and 400-year-old wizards, and then you've got the sort of the silent stoic older brother who's the axe guy, Morgan. They've got really, really good character types, and they really do make it that sort of family vibe. And then, of course, there's the marriages and intermarriages and all of that happens. So,
yeah, I think some of the best books, especially if you're involved on like a quest, it's like when you get a tight knit group of characters, and they stick around for a while, that it can be really cool. You don't get something like that, and as amazing as it is, Game of Thrones, each chapter is about an individual out for themselves almost. Whereas in a lot of books, the books that I really like is that you got a quest, so you got people that have to stick together. Even something like Wheel of Time, those guys in Wheel of Time are kind of a found family.
In a way, in the beginning they definitely were the three, Matt, Perrin, and Rand, but then ultimately they kind of split off from each other. And
they really do go their separate ways.
And they kind of lost that. Like ultimately they, when they meet up near the end, it's kind of like three generals who once knew each other, and it was it was much more formal, and so it kind of lost that found family feel. Whereas I just had an awesome example. Lord of the Rings is a pretty classic one. You've got the hobbits and the protective older brother Aragorn and all of that.
Legolas and Gimli.
Yeah, exactly. There's that common dynamic. What was that?
Stevie, any found families in the meantime?
Yeah, so I just found a new family. My girlfriend actually gave me or let me borrow this book, The Sword of Shannara.
Yeah.
And I'm actually getting really connected to two characters, Flint and oh my God, who's the other character? Anyway, the two brothers, I really got connected to them because they reminded me of my brother and I. But strangely enough, the families I've gotten most connected to in books were sci-fi. Namely Heir to the Jedi, which is Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. I always felt like I was right along with them, as well as the two other Star Wars books that I've read. And right now, I felt really connected to the family of Ready Player One.
Yeah.
In
the movie or the book?
The book. Yeah. So I'm a really big fan of the author. I say Ernest Clive because he also wrote the script for Fanboys, which is that Star Wars Fanboys movie.
Yeah,
he wrote that. So I felt really connected to those guys. But strangely enough, and we already talked about Lord of the Rings, which was a big reason why I read it, was to just be a part of all of that. But honestly, if I don't get connected to a family in a fantasy novel, I will stop. I'm usually a completionist, but if I can't get connected in some way or feel like I am the main character, I can't read it anymore. It's not worth it to me, and I'll go find another home. Which was finishing Kings of the Wild. I was very quiet the rest of the day. I was at the beach and I finished it, and people like kept coming and messing with me and like pretending like they were going to throw the book in the ocean. And I was like getting legitimately mad. Like, don't you touch it. Those are my brothers you're touching.
I was going to say about Game of Thrones, had he not been George R.R. Martin and literally any other writer, he could have really done that with the Night's Watch. He really could have made that, like, especially after Jon becomes, spoiler alert, the master or whatever, the Lord Commander, right?
Yeah.
They really could have had them all rally around him. And of course, they made, them stab him in the back and everywhere else because it's George R.R. Martin, and that's sort of how his world is.
What's going to happen.
Yeah.
But
that's true.
So should we go ahead and get to the reading now that it's a little bit later?
Nicholas, do you have a scene that you absolutely loved that you want us to read?
So we're going to read it, all three of us together?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know. I'm trying to think of one with three people in it.
Oh, it doesn't have to be three. It can be two, or it can be whatever. I want to do the one of chapter 3, one song, because that scene, that thing before it says, before she actually does her performance, that was awesome.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
And how long do you want to go, Andy, in this?
It's a few pages, and there's a very visible pausing point.
Okay, sounds good.
Which, so what's the pausing point? The end of the song?
Yeah, and then that line, and then and the crowd went wild. That's where it pauses. Yeah,
but there's not too many different possible people singing or people talking.
That's fine.
Okay, well, how about I narrate it?
Okay.
And we'll just fill in the voices.
And then someone can play Tam, and someone can play every other character.
All right, Steve, you play Tam, and I'll do the other characters.
Okay. She's just like a gruff little girl, or normal?
No, just a normal. Just your normal voice will do. Perfect.
I don't like this book anymore. Cool. Let's do it.
See, but I'm going to start with Tam approach the stage.
Yeah.
That's cool?
Oh,
that's
okay.
Really cool.
Wait a minute. Where's that?
It's the very next page, 22. Okay. Tam approached the stage. Should we set the scene up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, Tam works as a server in this bar. Bloody Rose and her band have visited it, and her drunk uncle has volunteered her to be Fable's next, Fable is the name of Rose's band, to be their next bard. And so when Tam meets Bloody Rose, she faints. And so in order to impress her, Bloody Rose says, you can play me one song. If I like it, you're in the band. If not, it's been great knowing you. So this is Tam going to play her one song. Tam approached the stage. She didn't even have an instrument. What sort of bard didn't own an instrument? You're not a bard, she reminded herself. You're a girl who's about to embarrass herself in front of 200 people, including Bloody Rose herself. A glance toward the balcony told her Rose was watching, still dragging on the half-pipe she'd lit earlier. Free Cloud was beside her, Brune and Cura further along the rail. Word that Fable was auditioning a new bard had swept the room like a brush fire. Now that the racket was starting to dwindle, Tam would be expected to take the stage and sing a song that might or might not change her life, or change the course of her life forever after. Terra and Timax were watching from behind the bar. The Arachnian offered her a three-handed wave and shouted,
"You've got this!"
Bran was shooing patrons from the table closest to the stage, while Edwick...
Here.
The old bard thrust his lute into her hands.
This is yours now.
No, I can't.
She protested. The lute, which the bard referred to as Red 13, Final Fantasy reference, was the instrument on which Tam had learned to play. It was Ed's pride and joy. He'd had it for as long as Tam could remember, and had never played another instrument that she knew of.
Take her.
He insisted.
Trust her. Do you know what song you'll play?
Tam knew 100 songs, but just now she couldn't recall even one of them. She shook her head.
Well, good luck.
Edwick retreated to a seat beside Bran, and the entire tavern suddenly hushed all at once. Cradling her borrowed lute, Tam stepped onto the stage and crossed to the vacant stool. The boards squealed beneath her feet, impossibly loud. Her mind was racing, trying desperately to think of a song, any song, let alone one that would impress Rose. And then she had it. Castia. It was rowdy and rousing, guaranteed to get the crowd on her side. It condensed the Battle of Castia, during which Granduil's mercenaries had overcome the Duke of Enland and his heart-wild horde, into 7 verses, and in an instrumental solo Tam hoped to hell she was capable of pulling off. Better still, it painted Rose's father, Golden Gabe, as the greatest hero in the 5 courts. I'm going to skip the next part because it's a bit of a spoiler for Book 1.
Okay.
Castia was perfect. She took a breath, waited for the silence to deepen, the way Edwick had taught her to. And then...
The fuck is this?
Brannigan was standing, having sipped his whiskey before spewing it onto his lap.
What in the cold heart of hell did you put in here, Max? Lamp oil? Piss? Gods, is this Hatcher piss?
He sniffed it and went so far as to taste it again.
It's bloody awful.
Edwick dragged him down into his seat and hissed at him to shut up.
Sorry.
He told the room.
Sorry, Tam. Go on, love.
Tam took another breath, waited again for that utter silence to descend, and then plucked the opening chords of Castia. A roar of approval went up from the commons. A great big smile broke across Brannigan's face, and Edwick nodded approvingly. When Tam looked to the balcony, though, Rose seemed uninterested. She stamped her half-pipe out on the rail and said something under her breath to Freecloud. The shaman, Brune, pulled his long hair aside. He locked eyes with Tam and shook his head so slightly it was almost imperceptible. She stopped. The song's opening notes were left shivering in the air. A confused murmur arose and left behind a bewildered hush.
Can I start over?
She called up to Rose. The mercenary's eyes narrowed.
If you'd like.
Tam closed her eyes, aware that her hands were trembling, that her foot was tapping nervously at the boards beneath her. She could hear her heart pounding, feel her blood rushing, see her dream of leaving Ardburg in Fable's company lingering by the door, already clenching its cloak against the cold outside. Tam thought of her father, of how furious he'd be if he could see her now. She thought of her mother, of how proud she'd be if she could see her now. Before she knew it, her fingers picked out a melody, slow and soft and sad. It was one of her mother's songs, Tam's favorite. Her father's too, once upon a time. She was forbidden to play it, of course. She tried singing it to herself once, shortly after her mother's death, but grief had overwhelmed her, stifling her voice with sobs. Now it spilled out of her. The lute sang beneath her fingertips, and her words sailed toward the rafters like floating lanterns set loose on a summer night. The song was called Together. It wasn't rowdy or rousing. It didn't garner a cheer as she played it, and her uncle's expression, Edwic's too, was mournful. As the song went on, though, the ghost of a smile haunted his lips. Together wasn't about a battle. There were no monsters in it. No one was slain, and nothing at all was vanquished. It was, instead, a love letter from a bard to her band. It was about the little moments, the quiet words, the unspoken bond shared by men and women who eat and sleep and fight alongside one another day after day. It was about a bandmate's laughter, a bunkmate's snoring. Lily Hashford had dedicated a whole verse to describing her husband's sidelong smile, and another decrying the smell of Bran's socks when he pulled his boots off.
They're my lucky socks.
She heard her uncle confess to the old bard beside him.
I'm still wearing them.
Another unique aspect of Together was that the music ended before the words, so that Tam sang the last refrain with her lute in her lap. Her hands were motionless. Her foot was still. Her aching heart beat a slow and steady cadence inside her. The song ended, and you could hear the candles flicker in the silence that followed. As 200 heads turned to the balcony above. Brune and Kira were watching Rose. Freecloud was looking down at Tam. He was grinning, Tam saw, because he already knew. Welcome
to Fable,
said Rose, and the crowd went wild.
That scene there, you know, I had an image of like Pink Floyd, like heavy on the minor chords, just that mournful. That was exactly what I was getting. And then what you do with the song later on in the book, loved that.
I'm glad. That was a risky scene. I thought before I wrote it, they were going to make me take it out. But once I'd written it,
this one here,
the one at the end.
Okay.
Because I about halfway through, I was like, oh, you know, it'd be cool if that happened. Because it was actually very much inspired by. Oops, sorry. Inspired by the U2 song "One."
Okay.
And there's a couple beautiful, beautiful live versions of "One" where the band doesn't even bother singing, and just the crowd sings it. And so, yeah, the idea for what they do later on in that book kind of sprung up, and I was like, they'll make me take it out. But as soon as I had written it, I was like, yeah, they're going to let me keep it.
Yeah, no, I think that was better for me than the rest of the battle scene, because, you know, that was that moment that gives you chills before the battle.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, that was like that emotional scene that really hit hard.
Oh, that makes me happy to hear. Thank you for saying so.
Quick question, and that is, what is your plan after your contract with Orbit is done for this trilogy? Do you have one?
I haven't really got one yet.
To keep
obviously,
out.
Someday. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Someday I'd like to write, you know, maybe some prequel stories, whether those are full books or novellas. I'd love to obviously explore some of the early adventures of Saga from the first book.
Mm-hmm. That'd be cool.
But also some short story or novella sized tales of Last Leaf. I would love to tell Last Leaf's story from his perspective, or at least like until we got the Horde going, because there's a lot to unpack about his character, I think. And Larkspur would be a pretty cool one, I think.
Yeah, definitely. She was one of my favorites.
Yeah, and then Kira there's a character in Kira in book 2. I think her past would be pretty cool to explore a little bit.
Oh yeah, how she developed that power, sort of like her coming of age.
Yes,
novel, you know, how she develops that ability. That would be grim and dark as hell, but awesome.
Exactly, and some of the things that gave birth to that, yeah. But I think I'd probably like to write something different. Obviously, the same with my voice and hopefully humor injected into a heartfelt story. But I'd like to explore something wholly different, at least for another trilogy until I return.
Outside of this world?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. We disapprove strongly, young man.
Well, I've got an idea that I can't friggin' wait to start it. Like I think it's a friggin' great idea. I told some stranger in Starbucks the other day, and he laughed his ass off the moment I said what it was. And it's not necessarily like unbelievably humorous, but I think it'll work really well. It's very close to Kings of the Wild while still being in a very different setting. And I think it'll still have the same kind of like camaraderie, humor, heart, that because you do like when your favorite writers do something similar to what the reason you fell in love with them, but it can be refreshing to be in a new world, I think.
Well, you know what? Okay, so I am slightly of a different opinion because I love Marvel Comics, right? And so Marvel Comics all takes place in the same universe, even if some of the characters never meet. Or if, you know, like sort of like how Wolverine hops between the X-Men and the Avengers and X-Force, and he goes like that, right? Could you do that with your new series? Same world, totally different continent, totally different setting, but knowing that if you ever wanted to, you could bring monsters from the Heart Wild. You could bring the Druids. You could bring the mercenaries. You could bring these things into your world. And so, like, that's what I've done with my series. Is one series is one character, one series is another character, and then they come together, and it's just the fans are like, "Oh yes, we've finally been waiting for these two characters to clash."
Yeah,
sounds like a World of Warcraft expansion.
Exactly. Well, it would be tough to do it in mine only because the world changes so drastically between the first book and the third book. Um, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I do have an idea for a book that would take place after this, because none of the books really, as much, even in the first one, doesn't do it that much, but none of them go into the Heart Wilds as much as I would have liked.
Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely have an idea for like a fourth book that's sort of just like a straight up into the Heartwild slog, where you see all the places on the map, you learn all about it, why it's, you know, kind of poisons people that live there, and maybe resolve that aspect of the books, because all the rest of the books have to deal with the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah.
Andy, do you have another question?
No, I was going to say either way, you're going to get people reading. You're going to get us reading it. So.
Yeah. And of course, someday I just as like a joke, but God, I would love to do it. Is Gamelon in space?
Oh,
which is like,
I'd read it,
because you know he gets frozen at the end of refrozen at the end of the first book. And my plan is to, no matter what, if he ever comes out of being frozen, to refreeze him so that he is always the just ultimate warrior. And so I thought it'd be so fucking funny to write something where it was like, in the far future, the world was, you know, wrecked, spacefaring civilization has this, you know, whatever artifact statue they've brought on board. Some crazy alien gets onto the ship and Gamelon gets unthawed. He's got a battle axe. He's on a spaceship. He's like, monster, got this. Watch me.
That
just Gamelon in space.
That would be hilarious.
Like Conan the Barbarian in space.
Yeah. Oh, you know? Dude, that would be the best weird sci-fi novel ever.
Yeah, I just don't know who would publish it, because it probably couldn't be like a full trilogy. It would just have to be like something fun. So we'll see.
I'm glad you brought up Conan the Barbarian, because I've been wanting to tell Andy, in Austin, Texas, we have 3 pizzerias all branded after Conan the Barbarian. It's called Conan's Pizza, and like all over the walls, it's just Conan the Barbarian books and illustrations and signed copies and stuff like that. And it's one of the most popular pizza places. And in the corner, they have all these arcade box games. You know, the boxes where you can actually play the real arcade games like Pac-Man and stuff. Really cool place. So when Andy comes back to Austin, I'm taking him there.
Good. I was going to say that.
It's a deep dish pizza too, like Chicago style. Yeah, like eat one slice and you have diabetes. Quick question.
Well, it's a good
I keep saying quick question, but they're always long-ended. How did you come up with the map? How did you come up with the setting? And running along with this question, do you outline your novels, or do you sit down and just let the story flow?
With the map, I think I just kind of winged it. I wanted to have some giant impassable barrier between the main characters and their goal. And so, especially when you're looking at a typical D&D setting, a giant monster-infested forest is a pretty, safe bet. I don't know where the name came from. And ultimately, when I set about to dream, I didn't have a map when I wrote the book. I didn't have a map when I sold the book. My editors insisted on it, and I'm really glad they did. Because once I sat down to draw it, it looked really, really cool to me. Having that giant, like half your map is dedicated to forest. And then, sorry, I have it mounted on my wall, so I'm just looking up at it. But on the day they put me in touch with the map maker, I happened to find an old copy of The Hobbit in my basement, like a hardcover where the map pulled out into like a 4-poster thing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, hey, as a map guy, you might be interested in this. And I sent him that picture, and he's like, oh, I have the same one, and showed me that. And I think that was obviously in his head when he went to do the map for this, because it looks very, very Tolkien-ish.
It does.
And it's just crazy, crazy luck that I happened to find that map that day, that I got in touch with him, sent it to him, he responded, and I was blessed with that insane, beautiful Tolkien-less looking map. And then as far as outline goes, I wish I would, and I intended to with this third one, but I just couldn't. I just can't do it. I can't think of. I know the basic general idea, but I can't commit myself to writing these plots out that may or may not happen, because so often I do like to go organically, and I like to surprise myself with stuff, and so many, especially with something like Kings of the Wild, where you know where they're going to end up at the beginning of the book. You just know already. So you have to make that journey as random as possible. So part of, I think, what helped Kings of the Wild's pacing was that from chapter to chapter, I didn't know what was going to happen. And often I would get near the end of the chapter and I'd be like, what's like a really crazy twist that could happen? And then I would do that. And adding airships kind of helped because then suddenly it was like, oh, you can go someplace really quick. You don't have to worry about the journey in between. So you kind of skip that part. And then, oh, your airship didn't work out so well. So guess what? Now you get this part of the journey and it's different than you would have expected. So
that's a really good answer. I also write without an outline. I've tried the outline and I think I'm going to have to do it for this next plan. But like today, there was a pirate battle that ended in a sewer. I didn't see that coming. I was like, where the hell did the pirates come from? And now this guy's getting high off shit fumes. So it's been, Andy's like, what the
exactly.
hell?
Those things surprise you. Do you plot, Andy?
I do. Not like super detailed, but I need to know where the story's going so I can figure out the most effective way to get them there.
Yeah.
And it helps me to get things done faster because I'll pull days where I write about 13 to 15,000 words. And I don't do all the
What did you just fucking say?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah. So I write in 2,000 word chapters, give or take, and I can do about 2,000 words in an hour. But I don't do all the details like your prose is so flowing and you've got the scenario painted so well. I don't do that in the rough draft. I'll just focus on the characters and the emotions and the feelings and the action, and then in the polish up, I'll go back and I'll flesh things out. And so far, it hasn't like affected the world building or the characterization. So far, but that really helps because if I've got sort of a rough outline of where I want the story to go, and then I am letting it flow, but I know where I want it to flow to, it helps me to get to get these books done quickly.
And I can see that being helpful because once you've written a rough outline of the whole book, when you're going through and doing your polish, you can add nuanced lines that are going to be themes picked up later in the books.
Exactly.
Without you just stumbling into it. So yeah, I do envy you that, and I will try in future books to outline.
Yeah, like actually
more than I do.
In one of the first chapters of my book 1 that I'm working on now, this guy gives a kid a dagger. That dagger plays a role, throughout by the end of the book 1, but the real payoff comes in at the climax of book 5. But because I knew that I needed that to happen, I could give him that dagger in the beginning thing. And then, so like being able to build things like that is
totally,
it's not only possible, but it's easier or more possible when you've got at least a general outline of where the stories are flowing.
Yeah. Do either of you guys use Scrivener at all, or what do you use?
I use it just for organization. So I keep all my characters, all my lore in there. It's been super helpful, but I do not write in it because it has screwed me over more than once. Big time.
Oh, really? How so?
It's been my fault, obviously, just not knowing how to compile it and save it correctly. And I was saving it into Dropbox, and for some reason that messed it all up, and I lost, I think it was like 8,000 words one time, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. So now I just use Scrivener for organization, and I write in Word. I'm guessing you use Scrivener.
No, I use Microsoft Word. I just downloaded Scrivener yesterday. I thought I would give it a shot, maybe for. I'm thinking that sometimes at night, if I feel like writing, but I'm burnt out on book 3, I might start that next project and write it the way like Andy writes his. And a lot of people, it works for a lot of people, is just write. And if you get something you don't know or you're not clear of, just skip it or write XXXX, keep going. Don't stop to research how boat works or if avocados can grow in this climate. Just write and get it out. So I think I might try that exercise to get better at it.
Cool. Yeah.
The blue background of Microsoft Word is now such an important part of my writing process. I don't know, how writers have sort of their foibles, right?
Yeah.
And so trying to write without that blue background, like trying to write in Google Documents it just doesn't flow as well. We're professional, we can make things happen. But to really get into that groove, that blue background, sort of the serenity kind of helps.
Interesting. My claps Word down so that you can't see anything out on the outside, so it's just white for me.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Then you might like Scrivener because I didn't like it because I needed that actual page, but in Scrivener it's just the whole screen, so you might like it.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
I found out whenever I compiled it into a book, I had these huge paragraphs because in Scrivener it looked like a normal book paragraph, but in a novel it was like half a page. So I had to go through the whole novel again and fix all of that.
Oh
And it
wow.
was a pace. It made pacing weird for me. So I would just be aware of that. But anyway, Andy, do we have any more questions?
I think we're all questioned. I mean, obviously we've got oodles and oodles more, but we'll have to save those for after the podcast.
Yeah. So Nick, where can new readers find you?
I am on Twitter. My handle is Nicholas_Eames, I believe. You can find me on Facebook as well. I'm pretty active on Goodreads. If you ask me a question or anything on there, I'm usually pretty quick to respond. So yeah, find me anywhere.
That's cool. I like that about you, that you actually respond to your fans.
Yeah.
Awesome. Andy, anything else you want to talk about before we end it?
Nope, that's it. We've got another episode coming on Thursday with Stephen Pearl. So we've got a really interesting topic to discuss about like mysticism and ghosts and stuff like that.
Oh, that'll be interesting. That'll be good. So Nick, can we expect to have you again for book 3?
Please, I hope so.
Awesome.
Which will be 1 to 3 years from now, give or take.
Yeah.
Well, I gave a approximation to someone on Reddit, and I immediately got an email from my editor saying, let's not give long approximations on things. So it'll be as soon as it's done.
Oh, okay. What was the difference between 1 and 2? Was it like a year and a bit?
Yeah, it was about a year and a half.
Okay.
So yeah.
So 2020.
I would 2019 for Orbit. Orbit says.
Okay.
Yeah, this is live.
I'm gonna write as fast as I can. I have no priorities in life besides that. I plan on I work in a restaurant right now, so I plan on quitting it hopefully.
Oh, cool.
In late fall. I should be able to move on to writing full time.
Nice.
We'll see, as long as I continue to live frugally.
Yeah.
So yeah, my plan is to really buckle down, like come November, just to buckle down and get some sort of thing that enables me to write it within the timeline that Orbit would like me to write it in.
You're gonna go go all winter hibernating with the big old beard.
That's the plan. That's
just go to your friend's that cottage that you're going to and just stay there.
Yeah, God, if only.
I like that about you, Nick, how transparent you are as an author. That's so cool. I think Andy and I do that as well on the show.
I hope to always be. I mean, I know when I was a reader, I didn't like books to come out every year. Now that I'm like under a deadline, it sounds kind of crazy to say, but all my favorite authors took a few years to write a book, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And when some of them started writing a book a year, their quality dropped so noticeably that I never read them again. But now I realize that it wasn't their fault. It was publishers wanting books every year. At the time, I just thought it was the authors wanting more money. I was stupid. So yeah, in a perfect world, authors could take out whatever time they wanted to.
Yeah.
But
cool, man. Well, hey, Nick, thank you so much for being on the air with us a second time. We are so excited for the third time. I'm putting aside time tonight to read some Bloody Rose before bed. Because that scene got me excited. So guys, you heard him. You can go to nicholaseames.com for more information. He's also on Amazon. I highly suggest you get the print copy because it's absolutely gorgeous. Looks great on any bookshelf. Nick, thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
And we hope all of our viewers out there have a great night. Please hit that subscribe button and leave us a review on iTunes if you're listening to the podcast. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful night. Bye.